Hello and welcome back to the Opposites Abroad podcast, a podcast about all things travel. Charlie Bosco here, joined as ever by TT down in Denver. And we've got a very special guest today. You might know her as Queen of the Exit Row, at Queen of the Exit Row on Instagram. It's Hillary Dowdle, full-time traveller, adventurer. Hillary, thanks for joining. And where are you joining from today?
Great. Thank you for the invite and nailing the last name that no one ever gets right. It's usually Doodle or Dawdle. It's very phonetic, but apparently that's challenging.
Well, I feel like if you can read, you can pronounce your name, but I'm surprised people struggle with it.
He does speak the King's English.
Just read it. You're all set. And I am joining from San Miguel de Allende, Mexico.
Okay, well, you definitely win that one in that case, because it's like 5:30 and just beginning to get chilly here in BC.
Well, we've got all of North America covered between the three of us, I think.
Yeah, I only found out quite recently that Mexico is in North America. So, what do you know?
Yeah, me too. I always thought it was in Central America, and then someone acted like I was an idiot that I didn't know that, and then I kind of felt like I was when I Googled it.
Yeah, well, one time I did a live sports commentary for the Pan American Championships, which obviously means North and South America. And I was going, well, we've got 2 North Americans in the final. Let's see if anyone can join them. And then Twitter or whatever people comment on explodes like, this clown doesn't even know that Mexico is in North America. And I was like,
they will cut you out there quick.
Yeah, I know. People on Reddit and Twitter and whatever else seems pretty keen to point out your mistakes. But yeah, I found that out during a live broadcast. So we're all on the same continent. And you're a full-time... You travel full-time, right?
Yeah, travel full-time. I usually pop into New York, which is home, about every 3 to 6 to 12 months, kind of depending on how long I decide to kind of stay abroad. But yeah, I've been full-time traveling for almost 3 years now.
How did that... God, I've got so many questions. How did that come about? I mean, how do you go from life to full-time travel?
So my kind of full-time travel ironically started in Mexico, and it was during COVID times, and I was working in public health care, which you can imagine in New York City was just an absolute struggle and was very difficult, and was working some pretty insane hours. And we went from a community-based program to full-time remote overnight, which was, to say the least, challenging. And I was working from my South Bronx apartment, which I was living in, working in, exercising in. Just became my box. And it just kind of felt like a smaller and smaller box as the time went on. And my friend and I decided to come to Mexico for 3 months. So we packed a bag each and her cat, and we headed to Mexico and planned our first month, and then just kind of decided to play our next 2 months by ear. And we stayed the full 3 months. I went back to New York for 3 weeks and just went stir crazy, and came back to Mexico for almost a month, and then just kind of paying to live in New York and not being there just got to be a lot. So I had an opportunity to have a sublet for about 4 months. And then I think that really just showed me I wasn't meant to go back to New York. I took that 4 months, and I got back and just decided it was time to really just kind of let life in New York go. And I lived in New York City for almost 13 years, and it just kind of started to lose its appeal. And I think that not going into work and not being able to do as much for such a period of time just really changed kind of my whole outlook about New York. And after 3 months in Europe and then another month in Mexico, I just went back and was like, I'm done. And really just started packing up, getting rid of everything, and took off. I haven't really looked back since.
The way you tell it doesn't sound like that big a deal.
I mean, I still don't think it's real. It's been a while, and it's one of those things that I think happened so quickly and like aggressively that it was such a blur that I didn't have time to really process it all. And I think I've just stayed in that zone for a couple years at this point, that this is just what it's become.
And are you still relishing the travel? It's not, I guess you start to take things for granted, or you start to miss maybe the connection of having the same people around you for most of your days. Is the feeling of constant movement still as enjoyable, and you're not kind of pining for any stability? You just still enjoying it the same amount?
I think I've just always kind of been a bit chaotic. Even when I was stable, there was always kind of, I think, a bit of chaos. And I moved quite a bit when I think once I kind of moved out of my parents' house 23 years ago. I've moved several times since and kind of relocated. And so I think that it's always been kind of comfortable for me to kind of move around a bit. And I like to think I'm a pretty social person. So I kind of find folks wherever I am. I always say I might be alone, but I'm never lonely. And there's always, I think there's such an amazing community of travelers and just people that are happy to meet up and always happy to have a connection of some kind of everywhere. I've been really lucky that I've made some pretty great connections in different places around the world. I never thought I would be that person that's like, oh, I'm in Portugal and I'm going to pop over to Paris and see my friend for the weekend. But, it's kind of happened, and it's just such a great, I think, thing that's happened. And I, again, have kind of developed relationships with different people. I'm very lucky that I have friends that travel. I'm spending the month with a friend now who travels, and we travel really well together. So it's good to have togetherness and then kind of go back on my own and say, let me be back in my little solo bubble. Leave me alone. So I think it's kind of an ebb and flow of people and no people, which I think I really thrive on. And I love being around familiar folks and having my different communities, and then being able to shift around and then say, I'm coming back. So yeah, I think it hasn't worn off yet. I hope it never does, but I'm sure it will eventually, and I will find a place to land. But until then, I'm pretty happy being transient.
I mean, how long do you stay in each place? Do you try and stick around for a few months or a week, or?
It depends.
What do you do?
So I also do quite a bit of house sitting to, I think we can chat a little more about in kind of our budget chat. That helps really offset costs, and I think gives a break from the moving around so much. So I'll find house sits that are like 2 weeks to a month, or like back to back in the same area, which helps to stay still and kind of reset in between. I do try to stay places at least 2 weeks at a time. I just did a trip through Guatemala that was like just changing constantly, and it was exhausting. It was amazing and wonderful, but also exhausting. And it's always just keeping so many moving pieces like in place is also just like mentally exhausting of like, okay, what time is this bus and where is the bus stop and where can I find a grocery store over and over again all the time is just, it seems so like cute and fun when you think about traveling all the time, but it's just always being on and always thinking about these things. So I do try to stay still for at least 2 weeks at a time, ideally a month. I think a month is like my sweet spot of if it's somewhere that has things to do. That's kind of my perfect, I think, amount of time to stay somewhere.
Well, and that's one of the things I really like about your Instagram is that you show the good, bad, and ugly about traveling. And I feel like a lot of people don't do that, or they don't do it very well. And you'll be self-deprecating. You'll make jokes. You'll talk about when something's amazing, when your day wasn't that great. And I feel like it's just very real. And then when you give advice and you write very, very well, and you write long lists sometimes of tips and things to do with traveling, and we were thinking of somebody for this episode. I just thought you'd be so good at this, because I think you're I just find you very engaging on there. What do you think about the difficulties of traveling versus when it's worth it, when it's not? Do you get other feedback like that? Do you get women reach out to you and they appreciate your honesty when it comes to being a solo woman traveler?
Yeah, and thank you. I appreciate that because I think sometimes it's hard to put out the like not cute aspects of things, but at the same time, I think so many people are like, it's all just flying dresses and glamour shots. And I'm like, I literally stood over a toilet the other day that looked like it was a jail cell and it was really gross. And that's a big part of this sometimes. And I don't think that is shared enough. And it can get so easy to get overwhelmed by these kind of unexpected things that are just not expected because people don't talk about them. So I do have a lot of people that do reach out and are like, thank you so much for being, upfront and honest about this. Or that will say, I'm thinking about going to this place, but what were some of your challenges being there? Or what were some of how did you get from this place to this place? And I'm like, I was crammed into a shuttle with 35 other people and it smelled bad and it was crowded. But once I got there, it was really amazing and wonderful. And I think those are the pieces that are left out too much that we need to hear about and we need to talk about because, I was in this really incredible, beautiful place, but to get there, there was no train or plane and it was a van full of people that took 10 hours to get there in 95 degrees. And I am always glad when people share those things with me. And sometimes when I do something or I've, go somewhere and I'm like, why didn't nobody tell me this? Like, this is awful. And no one told me that this was gonna be this hard. So I just wish more people were just more transparent about these things. Because to me, they're always worth it. But I think that sometimes just knowing what you're getting into and being able to prepare for that, or to say, this isn't for me right now. I have a list of places that are my, like, when I have money again destination, because there are just certain places that I'm not doing on a budget. One, for safety purposes and just for comfort. Maybe if I was 22 and on a gap year and willing to like sleep in certain places, absolutely. But there are just certain places that, one, aren't worth doing on a budget, and two, aren't worth doing with restrictions. And I think there's places that are worth doing it. I just did Guatemala on a very small budget, and it was incredible and wonderful. And I felt like 90% of the people there were doing the same thing. So it didn't feel restricting. It felt like I could meet somebody on a hike and we could go out to dinner, and there didn't even have to be a conversation about like, oh, like I can budget this, I can't budget that. So I think, just being really transparent to me is really helpful. I'm always super honest when somebody asks me for advice or like input or information. I'm always happy to look at. I'm not going to plan your trip. I'm not that person, but I will look at your itinerary and say, this looks great. Or just so you know, there's a little piece missing from here that you should be aware of.
Yeah, and I was in Mexico City, I think last year, and you messaged me and told me to try this bakery, and I went and tried it. And I wouldn't have otherwise. So it's those kind of little things that are really nice. But if a woman messages you or talks to you and then says, for instance, like, I've never really solo traveled, maybe they're out of college or they went through a divorce or whatever is going on in their life that they want to try solo traveling, where would you recommend they go, and would you recommend different places based on their age?
So I think what is really important here is looking at who is asking and what is their experience, what are the experience they're looking to have. Because I will be like, oh, go to Sarajevo, it's amazing, and I loved it, and I felt super safe, and it was really good food. But then people are like, where's Sarajevo? And I'm like, Bosnia. Like, I'm not going there. So I think it's really important to look at who's asking. And I think far too often we see these like, oh, these are my top 10 travel destinations for solo travelers, but it's never, I don't think it's ever that straightforward. I look at just like my friend group of, I could take any 5 women and I would give each and every one of them a different recommendation of kind of where to go, because I know that some really value comfort. And that is where they're at. I also know that some are uncomfortable in certain circumstances, and that the things that make them uncomfortable exist certain places and don't other places. I also know certain people will struggle much more with a language barrier than others, and just get overwhelmed by certain things. So I think for someone who's just really, really like brand new at traveling and solo traveling especially, I always say if you're not willing to really dive in, If you don't have a ton of kind of life experience, somewhere in the UK is a great place because there's no language barrier. You can read signs. There's good transit. There, you can stop and ask somebody a question on the street and they'll probably answer you, or the next person will if they're in a hurry. So I think taking those things into consideration are also really important. I always use my sister as the example. We are as polar opposite as possible. She never leaves her house, and so I'm like, drop me off anywhere and we're fine. So we would have very different, I think, answers as to what we're comfortable with, what we would want to do, where we would thrive. And I think it's such an individual thing that there can't be an overarching answer for that. Yeah.
Have you traveled solo to like Middle Eastern countries? There are places that you don't normally think of women going to solo.
I think the only place that would really kind of quantify would be Turkey. And I've traveled a lot of Turkey. I've probably spent close to 6 months total in country, and I've driven through a lot of it. And I think there's so many places also that are just so heavily stereotyped, like Mexico. You see someone, I'm in a lot of like solo female travel groups. Somebody says Mexico and the comments are just like bonkers of you're going to get trafficked, you're going to get kidnapped, this and this. And frankly, I think that's true of almost anywhere. There is danger anywhere. It's just, I think, finding, again, where you are comfortable and where you can thrive. And I think a prime example is, especially Turkey gets a really bad rap. And I hear constantly I was harassed or, things like that. A lot of feedback. And I, again, have been there so many times. I've spent a lot of time there. I have never experienced anything that I would quantify as harassment, but that someone else might. And I think that it's also important to look at who you're taking that feedback from, because we all react to things differently. I think especially women, because we all have very different experiences. I lived in the city for many years. I have never experienced more harassment anywhere in the world than I have in New York. And so I think for me, when things seem mild, it's easier for me to kind of brush things off. Whereas someone who might be coming from a small town in Vermont, gets a strong sales pitch and can get very overwhelmed, rightfully so, because that's a very foreign thing. It can feel very overwhelming. But I think it's always just so important to look at who's giving the advice and who you're giving it to.
I mean, have you always been this way? Have you always been kind of confident and you're nodding, able to kind of deal with life? You've not found life hard and overcoming tricky situations?
I think in a way, I think that my fear response is broken sometimes, and I don't think that's a good thing. I don't think that's always a good thing. But my friend that I'm staying with now, I'm like, thank God you lock the doors, because I don't, I'll go every now and then I'll remember to lock the doors, and she's already done it all. And I'm like, oh, cool. One of us is responsible. And I think there's good and bad to that, because I should be locking the doors, but it's not something I always do. And then on the reverse, if someone is more comfortable bringing door alarms and an extra lock, then they should. If that's what makes you feel more comfortable and safer, do that. Whatever makes you as an individual feel good. But I always joke, I was that kid that never wanted to spend the night anywhere. I would cross the street to spend the night at the neighbors, and my neighbor would be holding the flashlight for my dad to watch me walk back home, because I didn't want to stay the night. I would panic. But as soon as I left, it was off and running. And I think I've always just had this, I think that my drive to experience new things has been stronger than any fear. And I think that's kind of what has might be kind of a false confidence sometimes, because I'm just more driven by the things I want to do, as opposed to letting the things that should scare me stop me, if that kind of tracks.
Yeah, it does make sense. What is it that drives you?
So many different things. I think just experiencing new things. I think also I grew up in a really small city, where there wasn't much to do. There wasn't, people didn't necessarily leave. And if they did, they went away to college and came back. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think if, again, whatever makes you happy, that's what you should do. But that did not make me happy. That was never even a thought. Once I was gone, I was gone. And I think just the more that I meet new people, the more that I try new food, the more that I have more experiences, I just want more and more and more of it. So it might just be the kind of this lack of ever truly being satisfied, which again, I don't know if it is a great thing because I'm always wanting more. So I think that's really what just keeps driving me is this want to experience new things, see new things, and even return to familiar things that I liked to have more of them. So I do return to places quite often if I liked it, or if I want to see more of a certain country, I'll certainly return. I'm not like a check the box person, or I have to see every country in the world person. I'll go back to a city just to have a meal that I liked. So that's, there's nothing saying I have to go new places or have to see new things, but I'm always, I think, striving to do more and see more.
Yeah. I read the other day that ambition is the killer of happiness. And sometimes that drive, I definitely have a little bit of that myself. Can cause you problems, but it sounds like you've got a good handle on it. You keep going back to the places you like, and you're not kind of flogging yourself to always see more.
Yeah. I don't know that I always have a good handle on anything, but I think that's also what helps. I think kind of this thriving on chaos also helps me to kind of thrive in these types of situations. And it does, I think the chaos kind of keeps me happy, in this need to see new things and never really knowing what's coming. It's just always stayed really exciting.
You must be quite, we actually, of the many topics we wanted to talk about with you, we were going to talk about packing because, TT, you want to tell the story about how it was deemed that we couldn't know anything about packing?
Yes, it was, because Charlie and I pack very light. I haven't checked bags in years. I don't think Charlie has either. And
neither of us have hair. Saves a lot of time.
Yes, that's true. And I just have this kind of sense that you almost never run across a really hardcore traveler that packs huge bags and checks them. It just, over time, you naturally start bringing less stuff. You either the airline loses your stuff, or they damage stuff, or it's just a big pain in the ass, and you just start paring stuff down. And I got a message from someone saying basically like, you two guys don't know anything about packing because you don't have all the things that women have when it comes to lotions and makeups and shoes and all this stuff. And I get that, but I still think it's possible. So I'd like to get your thoughts on that, and tell us if you're wrong. And maybe you've I don't know, and you pack massive bags and you check everything, but it doesn't seem like you would to me.
I travel with a trunk, and I have assistants that carry it everywhere I go.
A Louis Vuitton trunk.
A Louis Vuitton trunk, yes.
Yeah.
No, I'm actually a very light packer. It has taken time to kind of get to a stage of the less is best. And full disclaimer, I am very much not a makeup and hair and options girl. My makeup bag is like a pencil case that has just very minimal things in it. But I also think, again, everyone should do what makes them happy. That is, I'm going to have that printed on t-shirts. If bringing 17 pieces of luggage makes you happy, but also makes you happy carrying it, getting it from point A to point B. It's not just being happy with the 7,000 dresses you packed. It's being happy getting it from point A to point B. If, again, having your 19-piece set makes you happy, and paying to check it and all of that things, that is fantastic. That does not make me happy. What makes me happy is being able to carry all of my luggage myself. And I do physically carry my luggage myself because I have converted to full backpack. I am also, I'm 41. I am not young. I am carrying things myself. And I will until I cannot any longer. And my dad with his rods in his back is like, God, please stop doing this. But I will until I can no longer. And I know that day will come, but until then, I am doing it. It's also amazing how much you can pack into a 42-liter backpack that weighs 30 pounds. And really 30 pounds is really my like carry limit of I'm going to be miserable if I have to carry this farther than like a mile. So that's kind of my limit is a 42-liter backpack, 30 pounds, and then usually like a tote or a smaller bag. And it's amazing how much you can fit in there. I think that that's also kind of this misconception that if you have a small container, you can't bring a lot of stuff. But it's really just being super strategic, and really knowing fabrics and knowing, I think, what you will wear. I have eliminated all of this like a what if outfit because those what if outfits I never put them on. And if I do, it's one time in 3 months and it's not worth carrying. So I think with practice, it's also just figuring out like, I don't need this. I'm not going to wear it. I think it's also just getting comfortable with if you're going super minimal and you're really packing for 90% of the trip, there might be 10% where you're a little underdressed or you don't have the right shoes or you're kind of compromising or you might have to buy something. And, you know, I've gone to dinner in Paris in sneakers that I probably shouldn't have worn, but I did, and, you know, nobody threw a baguette at me and cursed me and told me to leave the country. It was fine. I felt a tad out of place, but frankly, no one was looking at my shoes. And if they were, they didn't care, and I had a great dinner and a great time with friends, and that's what mattered. And I think shifting that mindset of, I'm in all these incredible, amazing places, is what I'm wearing the priority. And if someone is looking at photos of me and I'm wearing the same black t-shirt on Machu Picchu and Chichen Itza and all you're talking about is my t-shirt, like, fuck off. You know, like, there is this, like, if that's what you're worried about, you're not my people. So I think there is something really to packing and traveling light and just figuring out what is comfortable both physically on your body and also what you're going to be comfortable in different activities and going different places. And if that is a tulle skirt and, you know, a glitter tank top, that's fantastic. That is what you should bring and that is what you should pack. And if it is a pair of cutoff shorts and a cotton t-shirt, that is what it should be. And just finding what works for you. And it's very possible. And I also give the disclaimer of, I am 6'1". I am not small. So I'm also not packing, you know, 00 clothes. And my bra is probably the size of 4 bikinis and it's still possible. And so I also get the feedback of, oh, well, you know, especially for like plus size women are like, well, our clothes are bigger. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I also wear a size 10.5 shoe. I get it. Like, and I carry hiking boots and sneakers. So I think it's really just being super intentional and figuring out what your priorities are.
Yeah, I actually, and Charlie knows this, I love packing. I just absolutely love it. I love packing for different trips, especially ones in different climates. I think it's super fun trying to decide, you know, what am I going to wear in that climate? And then I love unpacking too, because I feel like it's very therapeutic to open up and throw everything in the laundry and get it. But I don't know, I'm like a packing nerd. I find it super interesting, and the art of rolling your stuff so it can fit in better and just all those little tricks. I think it takes so much time trying to figure out all the little tricks and tips to packing light.
I'm not a roller. I'm a folder. I'll fight you on that.
Oh, are you a folder?
I'm a folder.
Yeah, I'm a roller, but my dad was in the Marine Corps, and I probably got that from him.
I am a fold to fit the packing cube and then squish it as much as possible.
Oh, so you use packing cubes?
Yes.
Do you use the ones with the vacuum?
No. So fun quick story about trauma with the vacuum bags. I went on a girls' trip. Oh, we can have a whole nother episode on girls' trips, but I went on a girls' trip. This is why I solo travel years and years and years ago. And we all got like the vacuum with like the pump, like vacuum bags. Yeah. And because we all were, this was many years ago. all like, how much can we cram into these carry-on bags? And we're taking these like Ryanair flights and we are doing carry-on only and we're going to thrive on this and blah, blah, blah. And we overslept. Everyone overslept. And I think we were in Paris and everyone, because we had so much stuff that we had to cram into these vacuum bags, and we overslept and had like 2 minutes until our car service came to take us to the airport. So everyone is trying to cram their stuff into these like vacuum bags and like pump the air out of them as fast as they can, because otherwise we're not fitting our things into the bags that we have stuffed so full using these zipper bags. And I think I still have nightmares of the crinkling of the bag as we were all like frantically trying to get our stuff to fit back in these bags, because I think that we forget when we pack to leave is much different than when we pack like when we're there. So when you're packing to leave home to go on the trip, yeah, it's lovely to like perfectly pack your zipper bag and all of these things. But then when you have to change locations or pack to go home, it never goes in the same way, ever. Especially when you have 2 minutes until your car service comes and you have so strategically packed into these like pump zip bags that you can't repack in 2 minutes because you took 3 hours packing initially. So I will never use those again. I think that they have a time and a place, but never again. I am a compression pack cloth packing cube champion.
I'm with you. There's something about them. I don't know why I don't like the thought of it. But
have you ever traveled with a
reason.
pump, Charlie?
Well, at that time in Berlin, I had to. I just put it through the dishwasher and it was good to go again. No,
yeah.
Kidding. High pressure hose. One topic I wanted to ask you about, and it's, I was going to say the $1 million question, kind of ironic really, is budget when traveling, because I think all of us, as people that are interested in travel and look at it on social media, will be aware of, I'm sure we can all name our person now, the person who claims to be a full-time traveler whilst making money and clearly just has a sugar daddy or a rich dad. How does a normal person go about traveling full-time?
Well, I guess the normal person is me in question. So I was initially working full-time, working remote, which was lovely. I was making a good New York salary while traveling, which frankly went pretty far when I was in Turkey or Macedonia or Mexico. And I did that for almost 2 years. And I think that there, again, is this like romanticized idea of working remote while traveling. But you're still working. So you're still locked in front of a computer if you're working like a real, every job is real. But if you're working a 9 to 5 or you're working for someone else, you're not out gallivanting around or sightseeing or doing things. You're working. So you are in front of a computer. I was on calls. I was maintaining a schedule, which got, I was working for a company. I was working 9 to 5, which in other countries was 2 to 10 or 5 p.m. to 1 a.m. And just keeping track of like a time difference alone is, it just is so challenging. And then trying to manage, again, like, is the Wi-Fi going to be reliable when I get there? Am I going to have a space that's quiet where I can work? I think all of these things are, again, just so romanticized and looked over, and people think that you're on this permanent vacation, but you're really only on vacation on the weekend because you're still working. And I think even people with a super flexible schedule who work for themselves are still working. And you're putting in time and effort and energy that takes away from traveling, but then also planning traveling if you're moving around a lot. So it's almost like having 2 full-time jobs because you're just constantly planning your own travel, you're figuring out where you're going to be, etc. So frankly, I burned out from traveling and working at the same time. I also had some pretty major changes with my employment that made it, even a remote job making decent money wasn't worth staying where I was. So I quit like 15 months ago. My plan was to not work for 6 months and we've extended quite a bit. So I was able to save quite a bit of money still working while traveling, because my cost of living was essentially cut in half. And so I was able to save a ton of money because I was paying half, if not less, in living expenses. I wasn't going out. I wasn't spending $200 on brunch every weekend because all in New York, a brunch plus an Uber, plus whatever drinks afterwards, etc., you're easily in $200. So that I wasn't spending anymore because I was either places where that didn't exist, or I was by myself and I wasn't like, let's ball out and spend $200 on brunch in Istanbul, So like there was definitely a way to save quite a bit of money while working and traveling. And I just banked a lot of credit card points, so I haven't paid for a flight in a while. And just getting kind of savvy. I think credit card point savvy has really helped. I also really changed the way that I travel, which I thought honestly would be a lot more challenging. Like, I never thought that I would be in hostels, and that still is a little challenging for me. I still have very strict criteria if I'm going to stay in a hostel on kind of what that looks like. And again, that's kind of sporadic, and if it fits the type of trip. And house sitting has really helped offset costs, so I'm not paying for accommodation. I cook a lot, so I think that that's also something that helps to offset cost and to not just be really grossly unhealthy. So I think there's just really ways of figuring out, again, what fits you and whatever budget you might be on. But no, unfortunately, no sugar daddy or trust fund or any other assistance. And I think there's just really ways of figuring out how to stretch a dollar. And I've been doing it, and I do a little bit of freelance writing, which helps with some like just kind of fun spending. And I think there's also ways to find like affiliate things to do. There's so many programs that have affiliates. Like Get Your Guide, I haven't paid for like an excursion or an activity in quite a while because they'll give you a sponsored experience. And I think people don't take advantage of those things and don't realize that they're available. And look at all those opportunities to still be able to enjoy where you are without having to kind of blow a budget or splurge too much. Because I think that some people do also travel so aggressively budget that they do miss out on some things, and I'm just not willing to at this point. Maybe someday, but I think to me, if I get to the point where I'm not able to enjoy where I am and to do things while I'm there, I think reconsider if it's worth it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I went to Ukraine. We actually did a podcast on Ukraine with a buddy who I don't think will listen to this, but he sees everything through how much it costs lens. And we went to Ukraine, and there was a Chernobyl tour, and it was at the time like maybe $200 was the only way you could really do it, because you had to hire a guide and go in and things like that. And he just refused to do it because he said it was too expensive, and instead we went to the Chernobyl Museum, which is like $4, and did that. And I have always regretted we didn't do that. And now it's like it would be impossible to go because of the war. And it was $200 when we were there. Why in the world would we just do it? But he just would not spend the money. And I think you can miss out trying to save every single penny. And it's really is a balancing act. But sometimes, and you realize that, I think, because we're none of us are in our 20s, there's places you go and you might never go back. Like, it might be the only time you ever go, and you can miss out on stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if you go to Tokyo or Paris or London or wherever it is you go, and you don't sample the local cuisine because you're on too much of a budget and you cook instant noodles in your 8-bedroom hostel room, I just think you might as well not have gone in some ways. Like that. In some ways, some destinations, you just got to spend a bit of money to experience them.
Or you put them on the list of when I have money again, I'm going to go here.
Yeah.
And I think your example is perfect. When I was in Guatemala, I stayed at like a little boutique hostel, and they had a kitchen, and there was a couple, and they were both eating cup of noodle, which I eat cup of noodle all the time. Like, I love cup of noodle, but it's a meal up the street that was like big enough to split was $8. And I think that there is also something to be said if I'm not going to eat a cup of noodle if a meal is $8. And I think that that is also, and then sometimes I also question, like, am I not budgeting hard enough? Like, am I not doing this right? And I was like, absolutely not. If it is an issue of, or I think it's also finding a compromise. If I'm going somewhere where maybe the excursion is $200, then I, skip a couple dinners out and do have the cup of noodle because the excursion is more important than eating out, and finding that balance of what is the priority here and what is important, and what's worth kind of skimping on. Or maybe I stay at the not so great hotel, or I do a hostel because I really want to be able to go and do this other thing. And again, I don't think that is portrayed enough when people are showing this super glamorous lifestyle. And I was in this beautiful place, but then I went and slept in the 12-bed hostel and ate cup of noodle so that I could go to that beautiful place that I took the picture and put on Instagram. So I think that there's just not a full picture is created enough. And I don't think that people also realize that they can take a bit of different pictures and make their own to fit what they want and what their priorities are.
Yeah, I think it sometimes feels as if people have lost sight of the fact that traveling is supposed to be enjoyable. And if you're literally just keeping yourself alive and sleeping whilst moving between destinations, that might not be necessarily what it's all about.
So I wanted to get back to kind of the some of the stuff with you being a woman traveler, because it's something that I'll never experience. And I think some people that listen would be curious if you have like safety tips or stories that because I know even as a man, when I started traveling solo, and you go to someplace and you hear it on the news, and I remember I went to like El Salvador, and I was like so nervous when I got there, and then I got there and it was fine, but the news always hyped stuff up as being so bad, and then you get there, and I would imagine that it's probably even worse if you're a woman trying to navigate that after society's told you shouldn't do that stuff, and just kind of your thoughts on all that.
So I am a terrible person to ask these questions because I think that I've always been, I think I was also very much raised of kind of girls can do anything and like very independent focused. And I think that has also just made, sometimes I look back though, and I'm like, that was dumb. And I can certainly look at ways that I could have been safer in certain ways. And I think there's so many overall safety tips that people should use, but frankly that men don't, because they feel kind of invincible, or like, I'm a man and things aren't going to happen to me. And so I think just certain things like being really proactive in being prepared for things to happen. And I don't want to like put into the universe like, oh, bad things happen and blah, 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 but like they do, and being as prepared as possible. My phone got stolen in Portugal, and had I not had another phone with me, that would have been a nightmare. It was regardless, because still trying to get a hold of my phone provider and getting the backup phone turned on, because they were like, we're sending you a text. And I was like, cool, to the phone that's gone. And just, things like that, and being prepared, because I think especially like our phones are such a safety net.
Oh, I tell you, I can totally relate to that. I had my phone basically robbed from me, like strong-armed robbed from me when I was in Ethiopia one time, and I had kind of got complacent, like you said, and I thought, you know what, I'm heavily tattooed, nobody messes with me. And to the most part, that's true. But it wasn't true there, because I was in a place where people needed money more than they were scared of my tattoos. And the guy came up and robbed me for my phone, and it absolutely ruined my trip. And I didn't have a backup phone. It was like, and then you realize when your phone's gone, like, I don't know people's phone numbers. I don't know people, like, I don't know, like any way to get a hold of anybody. It's impossible to check in for your flight. It was like, everything was such an absolute nightmare. And now I've got so paranoid with my phone when I travel, and I tend to, which a lot of European men do. I generally carry a little crossbody and keep stuff in that, and things not in my pockets, because I can fight to keep that better than I can get pickpocketed. But yeah, that's a brutal loss is your phone. And I think you're right. I think men can get complacent of like nobody messes with me, and yeah.
And I've also gotten complacent with, oh, I'm from New York and I've been doing this for so long. And similar situation when I was in Chile, I had my phone out and I was contacting an Uber driver, and I still had my phone out as I was walking to the Uber, and someone ran up on me and tried to grab my phone and pull my bag off of me. But luckily the Uber driver yelled, and I turned so fast that my elbow hit the guy in the face, and the Uber driver was like, "Oh my God, you were so fast." I was like, "That was not on purpose. Like, it was just, you scared me, actually." And I just had a reaction. And luckily that person did not steal my phone. They got a shopping bag with like dirty clothes. So good job. But I think that we do also get complacent. And I think that there just always has to be an awareness without moving in fear. And that is one thing that I think as a person, I refuse to move in fear. But being prepared and eliminating, I think, some of those anxieties is really important, and finding a way to do that, again, without being paralyzed and not doing things and enjoying things. But like a few things that I always do as far as like safety measures, I think like 12 people have my location at all times. I forget my friends have my location, and they will text me and be like, where is this place? Or they will be like, "You're in the middle of the ocean." And I'm like, "No, I'm on an airplane." So, I luckily have people watching. I have people that know where I am. I do keep a Google Doc with all of my plans, itineraries, addresses, etc. So someone always knows where I am. And I share that with 2 people. So if, there ever is an issue, there's somebody who knows at least a couple steps ahead of where I should be, and when. And I think it's also really important to be realistic. I will never be someone who carries, again, like door locks and alarms and all of those things. And that could come down to I'm just too trusting of a door lock. But I think especially in places, certain like in Europe, I've had doors that have 6 bolts on them. A $9 door stopper from Amazon is not going to give me any more protection than is already there. And I think just being aware of your surroundings, and I think the most important part is trusting yourself, because I think that we get so caught up in the what ifs or this kind of being overly prepared for bad things to happen, that we forget that we're really capable. And I give the example all the time and have a whole blog post on it about this woman. Years ago, I was at Port Authority and I was taking a bus upstate, and this woman was like losing her mind and she was frantic. And the bus driver had given directions like 4 times, very clear instruction on like what to do. And she was like, "Well, I've never taken a bus before." And just me being me was like sick of her. And I looked at her and I was like, "Ma'am, have you never followed instructions before? Like, have you never done something new before? How did you deal with that?" And I think it took her a minute, but she was like, "I have followed instructions before." And I'm like, all you have to do is follow the instructions and everything's going to be okay. And I think we forget that we have done all of this before. We have done new things. We've gone new places. And I think we make it so much scarier when it's somewhere new. And when we added, I think, language barrier, things like that. But this is all things we've done before. As women, if you have gone to the grocery store by yourself, if you have made a new recipe and had to go shopping for the things, you've done this before. It's just somewhere else. And I think confidence and believing in yourself and knowing you're capable is the biggest safety measure that we can take.
And I think in some ways traveling has made me a jerk, where I don't, I don't talk to people in the street. If someone comes up to me, I generally I feel like in some places people learn English for a reason. That maybe isn't the most positive reason. What do you do when you're walking down the street someplace and a man just comes up to you and starts talking?
I think it depends on what he's saying. I think if I have just become completely deaf to like sales pitches, or, if somebody walks up to you and is like, oh, like, hey, pretty lady, I'm like, I'm not buying your shit, and just keep walking.
Yeah.
I think I've also just gotten attuned to what someone is trying to do. If somebody walks up to me and says very simple, like, hey, hello, I will say hello back. But then if it transitions to something either uncomfortable or salesy, I am very good at just like shutting it down. And I do think that is something that especially women are not taught. Like, we are taught to be kind and to be
and polite
and to smile.
And
I think that, again, it takes experience. It takes a little bit of practice to just don't engage. And it's usually as simple as not engaging. And just keep your face straight, keep walking. Also, don't wear headphones. I know a lot of people wear headphones out. But I think being aware of your surroundings, knowing that somebody's speaking to you, knowing if somebody's approaching you, is really important, and staying kind of in tune to your surroundings. Same with not being on the phone, or having your phone out, texting. Is even that I look at, I'm in Mexico and I don't text when I'm walking because I'm going to fall because the sidewalks are crazy. Safety comes in so many different ways, and it's not just, I think, being afraid of people doing bad things, but also just staying overall aware of your surroundings. And just, I think, making sure you know how to get back to where you are staying without your phone, and having your address and where you're staying written down on a piece of paper. So just certain like simple things like that. I've heard of people, and even I've been in the close situation of my phone is dead and I need to get back to where I'm going. And I don't know where it is because I've used my phone every single time to get to and from my stay. And I think that's important for everybody, because if you can't get back without your phone, you're kind of setting yourself up to get stuck somewhere, whether it gets lost, stolen, or dies. You want to make sure that you're able to show the address to someone or a cab driver or whatever it may be.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like every trip I go on, because I travel a lot, it's like I always learn some tip or something that I would have done differently, and I think it's amazing. Even people like us, and you travel more than I do because you travel full time, but the amount of mistakes you make or things you learn, or I would have done this or I would have done that differently. But I'm very cautious when I travel. When it comes to talking to people on the street, I generally don't go out at night. If I do, I'm really close to where I'm staying. But it seems like that's where bad things happen. Is you walk from super far through a city at night to go to some bar, and you're trying to walk back and you've been drinking. And so I'm more likely to have a drink in my room by myself where it's safe than go wander around at night. But that's just me. Some people really like that aspect of it. And that's not really me. But have you ever had any experiences where, you felt like, something slipped in your drink, or you felt like unsafe out at a bar or anything like that?
I've never had anything where I felt like something happened to me. But I've definitely had times where I was walking home and just felt uncomfortable. And I think there is a difference between feeling uncomfortable and feeling unsafe. And I think that also isn't necessarily talked about enough. And I think it's also so important when we talk about what is unsafe. Like, am I actually in danger? Do I feel that I'm in danger? Or am I uncomfortable where I might be hyper-focusing on something and that is making me unsafe? And I think comfort comes from so many different things. It comes from what we are familiar with, what we're used to. And I think a lot of that also comes from stereotypes and biases and also what we've been told. So I might feel, as an example, if I'm in Mexico, if I feel a little bit uncomfortable, I might innately feel unsafe because so many people have told me that I'm unsafe, as opposed to I actually feel unsafe. And I think that's important for us to also kind of remember, is why am I feeling the way I'm feeling, and just check in with ourselves and say, what is making me feel this way, and how do I solve it? And if that means I just stop walking and I call an Uber, for the rest of the way, even if it's literally a 15-minute walk, call the Uber if that makes you feel safer and more comfortable. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. I've also been very guilty of being like, no, I'm strong and independent and I don't have to call an Uber no matter how I'm feeling. Like that's stupid. Just call the Uber. Or also if there's another group of women that are walking, ask what direction they're going in. I think there's just take the moment to check in with yourself and say, how can I problem solve this? Because I think too frequently we get so caught up in the feeling that we kind of become unable to problem solve or troubleshoot, and that's can lead to actually being in more danger than you may have been to begin with. I think the one time that I was just being really stubborn and a little bit drunk, I went out with a Tinder date in Mexico City, and I was insisting on walking home, and he was like, you're not walking home to my Airbnb. And I was like, I know the city so well, and I've been here before, blah, blah. And he was just like, that is dumb. Like, you're being dumb and stubborn. And I was just like, I'm going to walk. And he was like, okay, I'm going to follow you in a very uncreepy way and make sure that you're not going to get murdered. And I will say I walked like 3 blocks and was like, this was a bad idea. And I let him put me in a cab and I would have walked because I was just being stubborn. But like, luckily I did have that check-in moment and was like, this was fine in the daytime and light, but it is now like 2 a.m. and it's a 20-minute walk and this is just dumb. And I took the cab, and there was no reason not to take the cab to begin with, other than I was just being stubborn. So I think just also listen to the people that know. If someone is telling you this isn't a good idea, then maybe listen and take that, advice, and just listen to yourself. And if it doesn't seem like a good idea, then you need to pivot and figure out a safer way to do things.
Yeah. I think it's sometimes you just ask. And I remember I was in South Africa in Cape Town, and I asked at the hotel, where it's safe to walk around, and they basically took a map and said, do not leave this area unless you want something horrible to happen. And unfortunately, I heard some other people didn't take that advice and had some really, really bad things happen to them. And it's a shame, because there's the way we want the world to be and the way the world is sometimes. Yeah,
exactly. And then I think also, like, I was given so many warnings about, like, Buenos Aires, and people were like, do not walk alone and don't walk at night and don't do that. And frankly, I did. And because I felt comfortable doing so. And I never felt uncomfortable. And if I had, I would have rerouted and pivoted. But it easily also could have been too late once you feel uncomfortable. But again, frankly, I think that could be anywhere. But there are places where people are giving you a warning for a reason, and just like, don't be stubborn, don't be dumb. Again, even if you're on like a strict budget, you should still have funds to get yourself home at any given time and not put yourself in danger or in risk.
Yeah, and that's an interesting example, because I went there last year and I was kind of pretty nervous when I got there, because people kept telling me it's so dangerous. Everyone gets robbed, like it's awful walking around. I never had any issues, and I walked all over, and I thought it was a great place, and I went out to dinners at night and walked back to the hotel, and I thought, so not believing the hype sometimes, because I was like, when I first got there, I was like looking out the window of the hotel, like, oh my God, it was fine. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think I went right after you did, and I thought it was a great city. I thought it was calm.
Oh, it's awesome.
Yeah, I would go back in a heartbeat.
I absolutely loved it. So, any last stuff you'd like to tell if someone's listening, or a woman's listening and she's thinking about solo traveling?
Obviously follow me on Instagram, and
which is what?
Queen of the Exit Row. And always reach out if you have questions, and not just to me. I think reach out to someone that you relate to. And if someone doesn't answer, reach out to somebody else. I also think it's so important, and I think I just reiterate this all the time, find someone that you relate to and that resonates with you, because everyone has such different styles and different attitudes about things. And, I think sometimes we want to be like the person who's doing all of the things or this and this, but if that's not really who you are, or that's not what's in your budget or your time frame or whatever that may be, find someone who likes the things that you like. If you are like a beer drinking girl and you want fun brewery recommendations, find another beer drinking woman and ask, where she went. Or if you want someone who really likes street food, or someone who goes to places that maybe aren't so popular, or if you love all-inclusive resorts and you want someone to recommend all-inclusive resorts, like find that person who really resonates with you, and that if you feel like somebody could be your friend, that's who you should follow. That's whose blog you should find. That's who you should reach out to with questions. Because there's so many just different styles and attitudes and outlooks, and someone might love something, but if it doesn't align with who you are, it's not going to be a good recommendation. It's not going to, I think, align with who you are and what you want to do. So I think that's really just my biggest piece of advice, especially for women, is find someone who just really resonates with you and that you feel that you can relate to, and either follow them, read their blog, reach out. I think a lot more people do answer and give feedback than we think. Just connect with someone that you think that you would connect with in real life, because it's great to kind of idolize someone and think that's the life I want to have. But if it's not somebody that you want to actually meet up with and have brunch with, that's probably not your person to get advice from or kind of emulate.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. I think we talked before about some of your international dating and stuff. So I think we'll try to have you on again when all our schedules align and have you talk about that. I think that's super interesting. Okay. And would be something people would like to get your advice on, because I think some of your stories are really funny, and
thank you.
I really enjoy them. So thank you so much for your time, and
of course, thank you,
and hopefully we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you, Hillary. Great to have you. We'll speak soon.
All right, great. Happy to chat anytime.